Not everyone is designed to arrive early. Some lives unfold slowly, like meanings that refuse to be rushed. In a world obsessed with speed, youth, and early success, the late bloomer is often misunderstood, seen as delayed, uncertain, or lacking direction. Yet what appears as lateness is often gestation. Certain inner traits cannot surface in a hurried life. They require time, friction, disappointment, and long stretches of inner silence. Late bloomers tend to spend their early years adapting rather than asserting. They observe more than they act, absorb more than they express. This creates a deep inner archive of experiences, failures, contradictions, and unanswered questions. While others are building outward identities, the late bloomer is unknowingly cultivating an inner foundation. This inner work is invisible, and therefore rarely rewarded early, but it becomes invaluable later. One defining trait that emerges late in life is self-authored identity. After years of trying to fit inherited roles, expectations, or borrowed ambitions, the late bloomer reaches a point of quiet refusal. They stop asking who they should be and begin listening to who they are. This shift is not dramatic, it is decisive. Their choices become slower but more grounded, guided by inner alignment rather than external approval. Another trait is emotional resilience, born from repetition. Late bloomers often fail more than once, not because they are incapable, but because they are searching for the right form of expression. Over time, disappointment loses its power to define them. They develop a calm relationship with uncertainty. What once felt like personal inadequacy transforms into psychological strength. Late in life, symbolic thinking awakens. Experiences are no longer taken at face value, they are interpreted. Pain becomes a teacher, relationships become mirrors, and setbacks become messages. This capacity to extract meaning from life rather than demand pleasure from it marks a profound inner maturity. With this comes authentic confidence, not the loud kind that needs recognition, but the quiet kind that no longer seeks permission. Late bloomers stop performing success and start embodying it on their own terms. Their creativity, leadership, or wisdom often emerges suddenly, surprising even themselves, because it was never rehearsed for applause. Finally, late bloomers develop deep compassion for themselves and for others. Having lived through comparison, delay, and self-doubt, they recognize the hidden struggles behind appearances. This makes them natural mentors, artists, healers, or guides later in life. The late bloomer does not arrive late. They arrive complete. Late blooming is often mistaken for failure because the modern world measures worth by visible milestones and early achievement. From a young age, people are taught that progress must be linear, fast, and publicly validated. Those who do not match this rhythm are quietly labeled as behind, unmotivated, or incapable. Yet this interpretation confuses outward timing with inner readiness. What appears as delay on the surface is frequently a deeper, less visible process unfolding beneath awareness. Late blooming is not an absence of growth, it is growth occurring in a different dimension. Inner development does not announce itself. It does not come with certificates, applause, or immediate results. It takes place in reflection, doubt, observation, and the slow accumulation of self-knowledge. Individuals who bloom later often spend years wrestling with questions that others bypass. They examine their motivations, challenge inherited beliefs, and sense that the paths laid out for them do not quite fit. This internal tension can look like indecision, but it is actually discernment forming. While others commit early to identities and ambitions, late bloomers remain inwardly unsettled because something essential has not yet aligned. Much of this inner development is shaped by friction. Rejection, comparison, and repeated false starts force a person to confront their own limitations and illusions. Instead of reinforcing a polished persona, life strips away borrowed identities. This stripping process is uncomfortable and often misinterpreted as stagnation. In reality, it creates psychological depth. The late bloomer learns patience not as a virtue imposed from outside, but as a necessity demanded by inner truth. They discover that rushing toward a role that does not belong to them would be a deeper failure than waiting. Another unseen aspect of late blooming is the gradual strengthening of inner authority. Early success often depends on conformity, following known formulas, meeting expectations, and performing competence. Late bloomers tend to resist this instinctively, even when they cannot articulate why. Their resistance is not rebellion but misalignment. Over time, this resistance matures into discernment. They learn to trust their internal signals over external noise. This trust cannot be taught. It is earned through years of confusion and self-doubt. When it finally stabilizes, it becomes a powerful compass. Late blooming also refines emotional intelligence. Living without early validation forces a person to sit with insecurity, envy, and disappointment, rather than bypass them. These emotions, when not denied, become sources of insight. The late bloomer learns how fragile confidence can be, how easily identity collapses when built on comparison. As a result, they develop a grounded sense of self that is less reactive to praise or criticism. Their stability does not come from success itself, but from surviving without it. What looks like delay is often a preparation for integration. Late bloomers tend to unify different parts of themselves: strength and vulnerability, ambition and caution, creativity and discipline. Instead of over-identifying with one trait, they learn balance. This integration allows their later expressions of work, leadership, or creativity to feel unusually whole. Their actions carry weight because they are rooted in lived understanding rather than imitation. Society rewards early arrival but depends on late bloomers for depth, wisdom, and transformation. Many of the most meaningful contributions emerge from those who first learn to listen inwardly before acting outwardly. Late blooming is not a deviation from the path. It is the slow formation of a path that could not exist without time. True identity is rarely revealed in the early stages of life. In youth, the pressures of family, society, and cultural norms shape behavior, choices, and even desires. People are taught who they should be long before they understand who they are. Careers are chosen based on prestige, hobbies are pursued for approval, and relationships are navigated according to societal scripts. In this environment, identity is often borrowed, layered with expectations that are not internally verified. The person performing these roles may appear successful, yet inwardly feel misaligned or restless, as if they are wearing clothes that do not quite fit. True identity cannot flourish in this climate of external demands. It requires a process of peeling back layers and releasing the compulsion to meet others' standards. Releasing external expectations is a subtle, often uncomfortable process. It begins with noticing the dissonance between what one is told to be and what one genuinely feels drawn to become. This awareness may emerge as dissatisfaction with conventional achievements or as a sense of emptiness despite outward success. Many dismiss these feelings, assuming they are temporary or irrational, but they are signals from the inner self, pointing toward authenticity. A late bloomer, in particular, recognizes that the admiration, approval, and validation that others chase cannot substitute for the quiet authority of self-recognition. True identity requires stepping away from the scripts that dictate behavior, even when doing so risks misunderstanding, judgment, or temporary failure. As external expectations fall away, inner inclinations begin to emerge. Interests, talents, and values that were previously overshadowed by duty or conformity begin to assert themselves. This phase is not always dramatic. It is often a quiet realignment where decisions are made based on internal resonance rather than public expectation. Simple acts, choosing a career path, ending an unsatisfying relationship, or pursuing a creative impulse, become expressions of self-authorship. Each choice builds confidence in the inner voice, reinforcing the notion that identity is not granted externally, but claimed internally. Over time, this leads to a clarity of purpose that is rooted in authenticity rather than imitation. True identity also demands the courage to accept imperfections. External expectations are often binary: succeed or fail, fit or do not fit, conform or rebel. In contrast, self-constructed identity allows for contradiction, complexity, and growth. A person learning to live authentically understands that preferences may change, mistakes will be made, and previous versions of the self may need to be let go. This acceptance of imperfection is liberating, because it replaces the fear of judgment with a commitment to truth. It is in this space of honesty and self-compassion that identity solidifies, free from the distortions of approval-seeking. Another dimension of identity formation is the integration of past experiences. External pressures often encourage selective memory, emphasizing only the achievements or traits that are socially admired. When expectations are released, the individual can reconcile contradictions, acknowledge failures, and honor personal history without shame. This integrated self is cohesive, able to navigate complexity without losing grounding. Decisions are no longer reactive attempts to satisfy others, but deliberate expressions of inner alignment. True identity, therefore, is as much about understanding one's past as it is about defining one's present. Finally, true identity manifests as a sense of inner freedom. Freed from the constant need to perform or measure up, the person begins to inhabit life more fully, guided by intuition, passion, and personal values. Choices become more deliberate, actions more meaningful, and relationships more authentic. The external world no longer dictates the rhythm of life. Instead, it becomes a mirror reflecting the inner truth that has been cultivated patiently, deliberately, and often quietly. Through this process, identity shifts from being an imposed role to a self-realized state, resilient and anchored, capable of sustaining the demands and uncertainties of life without losing its core essence. Repeated struggle is often viewed as a sign of failure or weakness, but in reality, it is one of the most reliable teachers of emotional resilience and inner stability. Life does not allow growth to occur in a vacuum. It demands friction, challenge, and the experience of discomfort. Early successes, though gratifying, rarely cultivate the depth of character that repeated obstacles do. Struggle forces a person to confront limits, navigate uncertainty, and engage with the raw edges of experience. It is through this process that emotional resilience, an ability to endure, recover, and adapt, is gradually forged. Each challenge encountered is not merely a hurdle to overcome, but a lesson in endurance, patience, and self-reliance. When a person faces recurring setbacks, they are forced to examine the foundations upon which their confidence and sense of self rest. Initial failures may evoke frustration, shame, or doubt, but with repeated exposure, these emotions begin to lose their paralyzing grip. A subtle shift occurs. Disappointment is no longer an endpoint, but a signal for reflection and adaptation. Over time, repeated struggle teaches that setbacks are transient and manageable, not catastrophic. Emotional resilience grows not because life becomes easier, but because the individual learns to respond with composure rather than panic. The storms of life, which once threatened to overwhelm, now serve as opportunities to test and refine inner stability. Struggle also teaches patience, a trait that is rarely developed in an environment of instant gratification. When progress is interrupted by repeated obstacles, a person learns to tolerate uncertainty and delay. This tolerance is essential to inner stability, as it allows individuals to maintain equilibrium even when external circumstances are chaotic. Emotional reactions that once spiraled into impulsive decisions gradually give way to measured responses. The ability to pause, reflect, and choose action based on clarity rather than reactivity is a hallmark of resilience cultivated through repeated challenges. Another crucial element developed through struggle is self-awareness. Each encounter with difficulty highlights personal triggers, limitations, and habitual responses. Recognizing these patterns is uncomfortable but necessary for growth. A person becomes more attuned to the internal landscape of emotions, understanding how fear, frustration, and disappointment influence behavior. This heightened awareness enables conscious decision-making and fosters a sense of agency rather than leaving the individual at the mercy of circumstance. Emotional stability is born from this conscious engagement with the self, reinforced each time the person navigates adversity with intention and reflection. Repeated struggle also instills humility. It reminds individuals that life is unpredictable and that control is often limited. This humility does not weaken resolve. Instead, it creates a balanced perspective. People who have endured repeated challenges learn to temper ambition with realism and confidence with caution. They recognize that failure is not an indictment of worth but a necessary part of development. This understanding reduces fear, enabling more courageous and authentic action. By embracing struggle rather than avoiding it, individuals cultivate a quiet strength that is not dependent on external validation or constant success. Finally, struggle nurtures adaptability, an essential component of inner stability. Life's difficulties rarely repeat in identical forms, and each new challenge requires adjustment. By facing varied obstacles over time, a person develops mental flexibility, emotional endurance, and practical problem-solving skills. Resilience, in this sense, is not a static trait but a dynamic capacity to respond effectively to an ever-changing environment. Each challenge conquered becomes a layer in a foundation that supports future growth, creating a self-sustaining cycle where adversity reinforces the ability to thrive despite uncertainty. Repeated struggle, therefore, is not a mark of deficiency but a path to strength. Through persistent engagement with hardship, individuals develop emotional resilience, cultivate inner stability, and acquire the tools to navigate life's unpredictability with confidence and grace. This process transforms what initially feels like suffering into a profound resource for personal development and enduring well-being. As life unfolds, many people begin their journeys chasing external markers of success, promotions, titles, wealth, recognition, or social approval. In youth, these goals are often compelling because they are tangible, measurable, and widely celebrated. They provide clear milestones, a sense of direction, and the promise of validation. Yet, as years pass, the allure of surface-level ambition can fade. Achievements that once seemed monumental may feel hollow or incomplete. The late bloomer, in particular, gradually recognizes that accumulation and performance are not the ultimate measure of fulfillment. Instead, what begins to take precedence is the capacity to extract meaning from experiences, relationships, and personal growth, a subtle shift from outward success to inward significance. Meaning-making is a process that often emerges quietly, almost imperceptibly, in midlife or later. It is not necessarily sparked by extraordinary events. Sometimes it arises from the ordinary moments of reflection that were previously ignored. Everyday challenges, setbacks, and achievements become material for introspection. The late bloomer begins to ask not "what will this get me?" but "what does this teach me?" This shift represents a profound recalibration. Life is no longer viewed as a ladder to climb, but as a story to understand, interpret, and contribute to. Each experience, whether joyful or painful, is considered through the lens of personal growth and meaning. One aspect of this evolution is the recognition that external rewards are transient and often unreliable. Titles, accolades, and material success can fade, be taken away, or fail to provide enduring satisfaction. Meaning, in contrast, is cultivated internally and deepens over time. The late bloomer often discovers that the satisfaction derived from understanding, creating, or connecting is more sustaining than applause or recognition. This realization prompts a re-evaluation of priorities. Energy is redirected toward endeavors that foster personal insight, authentic relationships, and contributions aligned with one's values rather than superficial gain. Another dimension of meaning-making is the ability to integrate life's contradictions and setbacks into a coherent narrative. Early ambition is frequently linear. A goal is identified, steps are taken, success is achieved, and life moves forward. Later in life, experiences are rarely linear or predictable. Failures, delays, and unexpected shifts are inevitable. The late bloomer learns to interpret these events not as obstacles or misfortunes, but as opportunities to refine understanding. Challenges are reframed as lessons, mistakes as sources of wisdom, and unplanned detours as openings to explore unrecognized potential. Through this process, life becomes a rich tapestry of insight rather than a checklist of achievements. Meaning-making also enhances emotional depth. When life is driven primarily by surface-level ambition, emotions are often tied to performance. Pride follows success, shame follows failure, and self-worth fluctuates with external validation. As the focus shifts toward meaning, emotional experience becomes more stable and nuanced. Satisfaction comes from alignment with personal values, contribution to others, and the cultivation of understanding rather than fleeting external markers. The late bloomer develops a sense of inner fulfillment that is resilient to changing circumstances, grounded not in what is achieved, but in how life is lived and understood. Finally, meaning-making transforms relationships, creativity, and leadership. When ambitions are no longer superficial, interactions with others become more authentic, collaboration more empathetic, and expression more profound. Decisions are guided less by competition or status and more by relevance, purpose, and resonance. Creativity emerges from curiosity and insight rather than obligation, and leadership arises from integrity and influence rather than hierarchy. Life, seen through the lens of meaning, becomes less about proving oneself and more about understanding, contributing, and experiencing deeply. In essence, the late bloomer discovers that a life oriented toward meaning surpasses one oriented toward appearance. Surface-level ambition may initiate action, but meaning sustains it, transforms it, and imbues it with richness that no external measure can provide. The shift is subtle but powerful. Achievement gives way to insight, recognition to understanding, and fleeting success to enduring purpose. Through this process, life moves from being a race toward being a journey of discovery, reflection, and authentic contribution. Authentic confidence is a rare quality that does not rely on applause, approval, or recognition from others. In early life, many of us learn to measure our worth through the eyes of society. Compliments and achievements feel like evidence of value, while criticism and failure are interpreted as proof of inadequacy. This dependence on external validation creates a fragile sense of self, one that fluctuates with circumstance and opinion. Authentic confidence, however, emerges only when a person gradually disengages from these external measures and begins to anchor their sense of worth internally. It is a confidence born from self-knowledge, experience, and alignment with one's own values, rather than the fleeting affirmations of others. This type of confidence often appears in those who have endured repeated challenges and setbacks. The late bloomer, in particular, has likely faced periods of uncertainty, misunderstanding, or even rejection. Early in life, such experiences may provoke self-doubt or anxiety, but over time they become opportunities for reflection and growth. Each challenge encountered and each obstacle navigated without relying on external validation strengthens a person's inner authority. The individual learns that competence, resilience, and integrity matter more than recognition, and that the self can remain grounded regardless of external response. Confidence develops quietly, as a sense of certainty about one's values and direction, rather than loudly, as a performance for approval. Another dimension of authentic confidence is self-acceptance. People who rely on validation often attempt to present themselves in ways that conform to expectations, suppressing quirks, vulnerabilities, or unconventional desires. This creates a tension between inner truth and outer presentation, and confidence becomes conditional. It exists only when others approve. True confidence emerges when a person ceases this compromise and begins to embrace their whole self, the strengths, flaws, and contradictions alike. They no longer need permission to be themselves. This acceptance is empowering because it removes the constant dependence on judgment and allows the individual to act freely, guided by conviction rather than expectation. Authentic confidence is also reinforced by experience and competence. When a person has faced life's unpredictability and demonstrated resilience, they gain a practical understanding of their own capabilities. Knowledge of what they can endure, accomplish, and recover from becomes a self-contained source of assurance. Unlike external validation, which is unpredictable and often shallow, this inner knowledge is constant and reliable. The confidence that arises from it is steady, measured, and rooted in reality rather than performance. It enables the person to make decisions, take risks, and pursue goals without being distracted by the fear of judgment or failure. Importantly, authentic confidence does not require comparison. People who seek validation often measure themselves against others, creating anxiety and insecurity whenever they perceive themselves as lacking. In contrast, those with self-generated confidence recognize that each individual's journey is unique. Success and worth are defined internally, in alignment with personal values and purpose, rather than externally, according to societal standards. This understanding fosters calmness and composure, even in situations of uncertainty or challenge, because the individual does not depend on relative performance or social approval for affirmation. Finally, authentic confidence enhances relationships, creativity, and influence. Individuals who act from a place of internal assurance are more likely to engage with honesty and integrity. Their interactions are not transactional or performative. They communicate openly and contribute without the need to impress. Creativity flows more freely because it is not constrained by fear of judgment or rejection. Leadership, when it emerges, is grounded in example rather than coercion, and inspiration is natural rather than imposed. The absence of validation-seeking frees energy for meaningful action, self-expression, and contribution, allowing confidence to radiate organically rather than superficially. Ultimately, authentic confidence is the product of self-reliance, reflection, and alignment with one's own truth. It grows quietly, often unnoticed, through experience and self-acceptance, and does not require validation to sustain itself. Unlike superficial confidence, which depends on external markers, authentic confidence is enduring, grounded, and liberating, enabling a person to navigate life with clarity, composure, and integrity. It is not a gift bestowed by others, but a state cultivated from within, a testament to the inner strength that emerges when one stops seeking approval and begins trusting oneself. Deep compassion is rarely born from ease or convenience. It grows slowly, nurtured by the soil of lived experience, struggle, and ultimately, self-acceptance. Early in life, people often experience empathy in its simplest forms: sympathy for a friend's temporary misfortune, pity for someone in distress, or concern that is reactive and situational. These responses, while genuine, are limited. True compassion, the kind that resonates deeply with others and transforms relationships, requires first-hand knowledge of suffering, failure, and imperfection. It emerges when a person has endured life's challenges, confronted their own vulnerabilities, and come to a place of acceptance with themselves. Without this foundation, empathy remains superficial, conditional, and often limited to circumstances that are familiar or convenient. Experiencing hardship firsthand teaches lessons that cannot be conveyed through instruction or observation alone. Setbacks, losses, and disappointments create a window into the universality of struggle. When someone has wrestled with fear, doubt, or rejection, they recognize that pain is not a personal failing but a shared human reality. Each struggle becomes a teacher, imparting humility, patience, and perspective. Over time, repeated exposure to the rawness of life fosters the capacity to connect with others in a profound and non-judgmental way. Deep compassion is born not from abstract ideals or moral obligation, but from intimate familiarity with vulnerability and resilience. Self-acceptance is the companion of lived experience in cultivating true compassion. When a person confronts their own limitations and flaws without denial or harsh judgment, they begin to see the same humanity in others. Recognizing that imperfection is part of being human removes the instinct to criticize or distance oneself from those who struggle. Self-acceptance allows one to respond with understanding and care, rather than fear, irritation, or superiority. It is this internal reconciliation, acknowledging one's own weaknesses and mistakes, that transforms empathy into compassion. Only when a person has made peace with themselves can they fully honor the experiences and emotions of others without projecting shame or judgment. Another aspect of compassion cultivated through experience is patience. Life's difficulties often teach that healing, growth, and understanding cannot be rushed. The late bloomer, in particular, may spend years navigating uncertainty, disappointment, or delayed achievement, learning to endure discomfort without surrendering. This patience naturally extends outward. Compassionate individuals are less likely to demand immediate change from others, to impose their expectations, or to become frustrated with slow progress. They understand that transformation, whether emotional, psychological, or relational, is a gradual process, and they meet others where they are with presence and care. Deep compassion also fosters emotional connection. Individuals who have experienced suffering firsthand can resonate with emotions that might otherwise go unnoticed. They sense unspoken pain, recognize subtle struggles, and intuitively know when someone needs support, space, or encouragement. This attunement is not performative, it is an authentic response rooted in experience. Compassion becomes a form of relational intelligence, enhancing the quality of interactions, deepening trust, and creating environments in which others feel safe and understood. Finally, compassion cultivated from lived experience and self-acceptance encourages action. It is not passive sympathy, but an active willingness to engage, support, and alleviate suffering when possible. This form of compassion is balanced. It does not overextend or seek reward, because it is grounded in empathy, perspective, and personal boundaries. It enables the late bloomer, or anyone who has undergone deep personal growth, to contribute meaningfully to the well-being of others while maintaining their own stability and integrity. In essence, deep compassion is the culmination of a journey inward and outward. It arises when individuals have faced life's difficulties, acknowledged their own imperfections, and embraced themselves fully. Through lived experience, patience, and self-acceptance, compassion transforms from a superficial reaction into a powerful, enduring force. It shapes how one perceives others, engages with the world, and creates meaningful, authentic connections, reflecting an understanding that suffering is universal and that care is most potent when it is rooted in experience and inner harmony. So, whether you've arrived early or find yourself blossoming later, remember this: life does not follow a uniform timetable. The challenges, delays, and quiet years of preparation are not setbacks. They are the soil in which depth, wisdom, and resilience grow. The traits that appear late in life, self-knowledge, emotional stability, meaning-making, authentic confidence, and deep compassion, are gifts that only time, experience, and reflection can cultivate. Embrace your unique rhythm. Trust the process of becoming. Celebrate the lessons hidden in struggle, the insights earned through patience, and the clarity that emerges when you release the need for external validation. The world may rush past, but your journey is yours alone. And it is never too late to bloom fully, authentically, and powerfully, because the beauty of a late bloom is that it is complete, grounded, and enduring. And when it unfolds, it leaves a mark that early arrival could never achieve.